Justin Kai is absent. Commissioner Doug Scott.
Here.
And Commissioner Dan Mexinger.
Here.
Thank you very much. Before we go into our regular consent agenda, I want to make sure that everybody here is aware that the agenda has been revised and PA 1703 TSP was removed. So if you're here for that agenda item, it has been removed from our agenda for the evening. And you can work with contact staff to find out when it's been rescheduled for. So that was last minute revision. So next agenda item is our consent agenda, which consists of the November 28th Planning Commission meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review them? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the November 28th Planning Commission minutes. All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. Council liaison comments?
Yeah, in the interest of time, I'll just go ahead and pass on comments today. Just let you guys do your thing tonight.
All right, thank you very much. And I did want to thank the council for hosting us for our board and commission appreciation dinner. That was a very nicely done event last night. So
All credit goes to Sylvia.
it's all right. Staff announcements, Erica.
I have a couple this evening. First and foremost, I would like to welcome and introduce our newest planning commissioner, Doug Scott.
Yes.
We welcome you and thank you for serving.
Yes.
Secondly, the Community Advisory Committee for the Comp Plan update they've been selected, and the first meeting is set for January 17th at 6 p.m. and this meeting is also open to the public.
And where is it going to be?
It's going to be here at City Hall. I don't have an exact location yet, but those details will be put out here shortly.
And is there a spot on the website right now set up for the comprehensive plan update?
There is.
Okay.
And it's been updated just this week.
Perfect.
And thirdly, the city was just awarded a technical assistance grant through DLCD for the work on our economic opportunities analysis, which is a component to the comprehensive plan. So this is pretty exciting, and we hope to start this work in early 2018.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So community comments. Community comments are limited to those items that are not already on the agenda. And if you wish to testify tonight, either under community comments or under our agenda item, I ask you to complete one of the blue cards and turn it into one of the members of staff. I don't see anybody racing up to the front to speak under community comments. Oh, wait.
Oh, we have a blue card.
We have another blue card. Drum roll. And that is for our agenda item. All right. So now we're moving on to old business. And old business is the continued hearing PA or SP 1701. So I have an official script to read. The public hearing on SP 1701 SUB 1703 Parkway Village South is now called to order. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff will present the staff report, questions, if any, by the hearing body for staff. We will then open the public hearing for testimony, and time will be limited as followed. The applicant will have 30 minutes split between presentation and rebuttal. Persons in favor of the application will have 4 minutes each. Persons opposed to the application will have 4 minutes each. There'll be rebuttal from the applicant, which is the remainder of their 30 minutes. We will then close the public hearing. No other comments will be heard from the public or the applicants. There'll be final comments by staff, questions of staff, if any, by the commission, and discussion by the commission. A decision may be made by the Planning Commission at the close of the hearing, or the matter may be continued to a time and date certain. If the matter is continued to a date certain, this will be the only notice of that date you receive. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the blue testimony forms and submit it to the Planning Commission Secretary. The chair will recognize people who wish to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the chair. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the record and make sure that the green light is on the microphone. In reaching a decision on the application, the commission must consider whether the application meets the relevant approval criteria in the city's land use regulation. Those criteria are identified in the staff report. There are 2 copies of the staff report available in the room this evening. The testimony and evidence must address these criteria or other criteria you believe to apply to the decision. Please note, failure to raise an issue with enough detail to enable the commission, the applicant, and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the city council or land use boards of appeal on that issue. Also, failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues regarding proposed conditions of approval, again with enough detail to allow the commission to respond to the issue, precludes an action for damages in circuit court. At this time, I wish to ask members of the commission to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest. Please indicate the nature and extent of the ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, and indicate whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing. All right, I would like to disclose that I have a potential conflict of interest in that I am employed by a wholesale material supplier of door and bath hardware and Division 10 products, including the Salisbury mailboxes that are specified in the plans. Our company is not the only distributor in the area, and I am not aware of who their supplier is for this project, so I will not be recusing myself this evening. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge any planning commissioner member's ability to participate? Having said all that, I'm going to turn it over to staff for their report. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Joy Chang, Associate Planner with the Planning Department. Before you tonight is Parkway Village South, Site Plan Review 17-01 and Subdivision Review 17-03. A revised staff report dated December 5th has been provided to address changes to engineering conditions of approval that are included in your packet. In addition to that, I want to identify that we did receive additional correspondence via email from Grammar Development, and that's going to be Exhibit I. Tied to the revisions to the conditions of approval, it was addressing an email from AKS John Christensen in regards to specific conditions of approval where they've asked us to either modify or eliminate it. So that is dated November 22nd, and that's part of your packet. And then we have an internal memorandum from Bob Galati, our city engineer, dated November 27th, addressing that. And since there has been 2 weeks lapse time, we basically incorporated Bob's recommendation and revised the Exhibit B tied to the city engineering's comments.
So, just for clarification, the applicant's email that was submitted is in our packet already? Or it is an additional exhibit that's going to be handed out?
It's an additional exhibit, so it is part of the record.
So it'll be Exhibit J?
Yep, J. And then the internal memorandum is Exhibit K.
Okay, thank you. And then we have copies of J, because K was handed out. Okay, all right, thank you.
Nope, no problem. So again, engineering the changes based on the engineering conditions of approval, modifications, and non-substantive changes as noted in my memo to the commission dated December 5th. So the site is located on the southeast corner of Langer Farms Parkway and Century Drive. North of Century Drive is Parkway Village Shopping Center, which is anchored by Walmart. South is Sentinel Self-Storage, which is currently being constructed. East is a light industrial use development. West are residential properties. The site is approximately 15.67 acres in size. Please note the images that are on the slide are oriented to the east. North is on the left side of the images. To help orient yourself, locate the roundabout. The applicant proposes a site plan review in a 5-lot subdivision with lots ranging from 0.50 acres to 8.24 acres in the light industrial plan unit development zone. Lot 1 is reserved for future use and is not included in the concurrent site plan review application, meaning that they will come in at the time that they develop for a site plan review. The remaining 4 lots consist of the following: 92,000 approximately square feet of indoor entertainment and recreation fun center, 32,000 approximately square feet of retail space across 4 buildings, and about 392 square feet of drive-through coffee kiosks. The site is currently vacant and generally sloped upwards from east to west. An existing stockpile of dirt located on the northern portion of the site was previously granted through a grading permit from the city's building department. The site is also adjacent to a regional stormwater quality facility to the southeast, which was committed to serving this tax lot. There is an existing drainage way, an associated wetlands and vegetative corridor designation located within an unbuildable tract to the southeast that was established as part of the Langer Farm subdivision plat. The project will take access from Southwest Langer Farms Parkway and Southwest Century Drive, both designated as collector streets in the City of Sherwood Transportation System Plan. The site has been owned and farmed by the Langer family since the late 1800s. This particular piece of property is within Phase 6 of the Sherwood Village Plan Unit Development that was approved by the City Council in 1995. All future development is subject to the conditions of the proposed or the approved Plan Unit Development and Subdivision 12-02. Because of the approval of the subdivision in 2012, the use of the property is vested for a period of 10 years per Oregon Revised Statute 92.040. In this instance, the PUD approved for all of the phases 6, 7, and 8 of PUD 95-1 allows for uses that were permitted within the general commercial zone in 1995. And an example of this would be indoor recreational facilities. The approval criteria are identified on the slide, and I'm not going to read them all to you, including the 1995 PUD design guideline and the 2010 development agreement. All review criteria have either been met or can be met as conditioned in the staff report. So this slide shows a rendering of the entire site. It's a view looking southeast. The site plan review requires urban design standards to be satisfied. The applicant has met these standards based on the following. The site has been designed around the Southwest Langer Farms Parkway frontage to create an inviting and pedestrian-friendly orientation that draws people in from the street. The project frontage achieves this using several urban design principles. First, the project creates an attractive and inviting streetscape, achieved by locating pedestrian-scale buildings as close as possible to the sidewalk and pedestrian corridors. The project uses window glazing, building materials, and design to avoid presenting blank walls to pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. Active space work when site materials such as paving, walls, and plantings are strategically placed and cohesively designed to address the street and pedestrian. The dynamic streetscape is created through well-designed and thoughtful outdoor spaces, utilizing storefronts, plazas, fountains, and professionally designed landscaping. Vehicle parking is separated from the sidewalk and located behind the building, in addition to screening and separation provided by the buildings themselves. The parking areas are screened with landscaping. The Fun Center is a large building, and its main entrance provide the focal point once one is inside the site. The building itself has been oriented so that its narrower, more pedestrian scale side faces the Southwest Langer Parkway sidewalk. The pitch roof, building materials, and other design cues recall the smaller retail buildings also front Southwest Langer Farms Parkway. This design scale and focuses the entries to the pedestrian while making the development look more cohesive. Per the applicant's narrative, the site creates an interesting and enjoyable pedestrian experience along the boundary streets, which of course are Langer Farms Parkway and Southwest Century Drive. Large storefront windows are planned to face the east or the street. Each street-facing elevation present multiple bays created through the arrangement of windows and doors and design, including the use of multiple types of stones, brick, lap siding, shingles, columns, and wood canopy supports. Building design articulates a clear and distinct base, middle, and top to break up the vertical massing and develops pedestrian scale. The use of ledge stones creates a solid base, and banding, in addition to changes in color and or material, emphasize horizontal breaks and vertical coherence in the building plane. Additionally, street-facing elevations have varying heights, dormers, upper floor windows, and roof types. Awnings and canopies provide shelter from the weather, and no aluminum, vinyl, or T111 sidings will be utilized. In addition to the design standard being satisfied, the applicant went above and beyond the required requirements and also addressed how the application can meet the alternative commercial design review standards. Furthermore, the applicant has satisfied the 1995 Plan Unit Development Design Guideline requirements. A breezeway is planned to connect the Southwest Century Drive south through the parking area to the main entrance of the Fun Center. The 10-foot wide covered parkway is separated from the parking and vehicle use areas by curbs, trees, or on both sides, and the stone and timber frame of the structure. In addition to the site plan review, as you know, the applicants requested a 5-lot subdivision. The lot configurations are reflected on the slide, and all applicable subdivision criteria are met or can be met with conditions. Applicable zoning requirements that are in addition to the site plan review and the subdivision are also being satisfied, where off-street parking can be accommodated entirely on site based on the parking requirements, minimum of 406 spaces and a maximum of 497 spaces allowed. The applicant is proposing 487 spaces, meeting that standard. Bicycle parking is also met by meeting the minimum of 29 spaces, and the applicant's providing 56 spaces, where 8 are long-term bicycle parking spaces. Perimeter landscaping buffer and visual corridor, since the boundary streets, Langer Parkway and Century Drive, are both collector streets, 10-foot wide landscape visual corridors required on both street frontage, and the applicant's proposing to meet that. Site area landscaping and perimeter screening standards the preliminary plans identified 487 parking spaces, which required 21,915 square feet of landscaping. The preliminary plan shows 35,780 square feet of interior landscaping and 1,720 square feet of perimeter landscaping, meeting those standards. So in addition to those, to the existing striped pedestrian crossing near the roundabout, the engineering department recommended a condition requiring a rapid flashing beacon on Langer Farms Parkway, south side of the intersection of Langer Farms Parkway and Whetstone Way intersection. Additionally, the engineering department recommended frontage improvements along Century Drive, including the undeveloped Lot 1. As stated before, we received public comments. Public notice and publications were completed as required, and we received one opposition letter expressing concerns on land use for industrial to commercial, decreasing the potential of bringing a new industrial high-value job entity. Concerns were also expressed on increased commuter traffic from other suburban areas, and those were Exhibit G of your packet, and these concerns were addressed as part of the staff report. And then again, as presented earlier today, one letter in favor was received that basically stated that the proposed provide a logical extension of the existing development pattern and provides a highly needed entertainment type venue for Sherwood. They also addressed how the proposed development meets various approval criteria and that they're excited to see this project come to fruition and urged approval of the project. And that was Exhibit I. So staff recommends approval of Parkway Village South site plan and subdivision, subject to the conditions of approval in the revised staff report dated December 5th, 27. That concludes my staff report, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Does anybody have any questions of staff before we call the applicant up? All right.
I have one
Okay.
question, and I apologize. I am new, so if this question's been covered in previous meetings, I apologize. In regards to landscaping internally in the parking lot, one of my thoughts on the development just to the north is that the internal landscaping is often too high and creates visibility issues throughout the parking lot. As you're driving around, you can't see potential pedestrians or other cars even going around certain corners within the internal structure of the parking lot. Has that been discussed at all or considered about the type of landscaping being proposed for this site?
The landscaping that was proposed for this site was taken into consideration. If landscaping grows too tall and becomes a vision clearance hazard, it could become a code compliance issue. That's one avenue that we could look at. However, it is on private property, so I don't know how that would work. But looking at future landscaping in the future with different varieties of plants and how tall they grow within the parking lot medians, that's something planning staff that we could look at further.
So definitely if the exit ways, as far as access points, we do look at site distance and making sure that there isn't anything within the triangles, the vision triangles. And the applicant would be required to make sure that the plantings would be at a reasonable height that would prohibit the visual clearance.
Thank you.
Which is no more than 3 feet in height.
All right.
People are looking to me to chime in, but yeah, I agree. I don't know that our code is specific about within the parking lot landscape islands how tall those can be. I think generally people, they maintain them fairly low, and if that's something that is a problem that we want to make sure future developments don't have, that's certainly something that we can kind of look at and talk about. But ultimately, vision clearance is their responsibility as well, and their liability if they're not maintaining their landscaping.
The city's responsibility ends at the vision triangle because
Right.
it's private property once it gets inside the site itself, correct? Yeah. Okay. But suggesting low shrubs. All right. I have 3 blue cards for the applicant and a consultant. And I could just have you come up and introduce yourselves, or you could let me guess names.
Well, I forgot
Joey
to introduce
Shearer.
myself last time,
Yeah,
so I'll
my
make sure
name's-
I'll do it this time.
And then you have 30 minutes for your proposal and your rebuttal. So we're not going to start the clock till you're all set up and ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Joey Shearer. I'm a planner with AKS Engineering and Forestry. Consultant for the applicant. Address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon 97062. And I'd like to begin by thanking staff for their ongoing communication and assistance on this project. There were some changes within the planning department early on in the life of this project. I think some staffing transitions. After we had some preliminary meetings and actually had one of the land use approvals related to this project. And I can't claim to know what was going on behind the scenes, but from our perspective, that transition was very seamless. And I think staff deserves a lot of credit because this is a relatively large project. You have a lot of materials in front of you, and there was no notice of any kind of discontinuity during that transition. So I'd like to thank them. I also want to thank the Planning Commission for your time this evening. We recognize that you are volunteering your time, and we appreciate the opportunity to present what we think is a very great project to you. As I said, you have large application package in front of you, including plans, several studies, and well over 100 pages of narrative. And this package truly represents a team effort. The applicant assembled a team of professionals responsible for putting this all together. That includes surveyors, civil engineers, planners, architects, landscape architects, and transportation engineers. So collectively, this is a big team. And as a member of this team, it is especially gratifying to come before you with a strong recommendation for approval from staff. We believe that there's substantial evidence within the application that all approval criteria are met or can be met with the conditions. We generally agree with all the conditions and the findings in the staff report. And I don't think we're going to come anywhere close to taking up all of our time here, but I did want to let you know that we have several members of this team here this evening, and we're available to answer any questions that you would have about the project. But until those questions arise, I'm going to turn it over to Frank Schmidt, the architect who has been working on the project. Maybe I'll stay up here and run through any slides if you need them.
Site plan would be great. Good evening. I'm Frank Schmidt, Tylen Schmidt Architects, 3611 Southwest Hood Avenue, Portland, 97239. I also would like to thank the planners. I mean, this is one of the finest reports I've heard, and I've been in a lot of these, and you did a wonderful job. Very, very thorough. Many of the things that we would have said have already been said, so I'll try not to bore you with saying the same things. What I want to do is just basically start with just a few key points for the exterior. Going back to what we had, where obviously we had to do a neighborhood meeting. And in our neighborhood meeting, we had some very constructive criticism when it came to the frontage of our Fun Center building and how it faced Langer. At that time, we had a wall that was roughly 20-some to 30 feet tall and didn't really address that street front very well. And so what we did was we took those comments and we softened the edge, maybe the elevation of the, if you can find the elevation of Fun Center. And what we wanted to do is dress it up a bit so that we basically had some of the same colors, slopes, materials that we have on the smaller buildings. To really, as we soften that edge, we've also set the building back a little further than the retail buildings are. And so the size of the building will appear a little bit smaller than it really is once it's pushed back a bit. And so we, of course, have additional landscaping along there. And so my point here is that we've really been listening to the comments that have been coming in and the community as a whole. When we were working on the property to the north, we kept hearing how the city would really like to have a fun center, have something where kids could be entertained. And this really suits that extremely well. We've tried to also keep in mind the family situation to where this center is really for all ages. And what we've tried to do, and things we didn't necessarily have to do with the breezeway, for example, where we can get undercover very quickly after parking a car, or where we can drive up right to the front door undercover and before we park the car, and everybody can get out undercover and be safe. And yeah, it kind of rains a little bit here, so that's really going to be a nice thing as we enter the building. So maybe the Fun Center itself. I just wanted to touch upon, like I said, I think everything has been really very well stated by planners for the overall. We did include the overall plan, even though the interior is something that we had early discussions on with the city. And for example, we had a zip line going outside, and that was removed from the project after interpretation was brought forward. But in this, since this is public record, this is still, even though we've submitted this months and months ago, this is still the basic concept we're going with, where a person can see the front vestibule as we enter in. We'll have a ticket booth. And what we really wanted to do is, again, really concentrate on the family coming here. This is a family fun center. It's also a family entertainment center. And these are really called FECs around the country. And so what we want to do is be able to, and one of my ideas, and I think it's catching on, is open it very early to where we have a soda coffee bar right next to the ticket booth, and we have a fireplace and some comfortable seating. I noticed when we were at Starbucks one day, the strollers had a hard time getting around. This, coming here, have a cup of coffee here and sit for a while and visit, you have the room to bring your strollers in. Again, really trying to serve the young mothers and the toddlers and children. And then we'll have restaurant, bar, and of course you see bowling there and laser tag. A person might ask, how do these guys know what they're doing? This is a very complicated project for someone who lives in Sherwood, Oregon. And the answer really is that you really tap the experts. So Langer family, they have hired basically an expert out of New Jersey who's done hundreds of these in his career, and also tapped every single vendor that will be supplying something for this, that being bowling, the laser tag, the ropes course that'll be overhead, menu consultant, restaurant consultant, and so really trying to pick the top people around the country and seeing different things around the country to really get the excitement and really make sure we're doing the right thing here, because this is way too much money to make a mistake. And this will evolve over time. One thing we found was within fun centers, they do change. There's going to be games changing all the time. There's always new games coming up. There's other things happening. And so the excitement will continue, we obviously hope, through the years. We have a racetrack that's planned. Those are electric carts, and so we don't have the gas to contend with and the noise of the gas. They're relatively quiet, but they do like to screech around corners sometimes. So it literally will be a family entertainment center. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that up because we all know what the retail buildings look like. You have examples of it on the north side, and pretty much it sounds like early leasing sounds like it's pretty positive. So there's going to be activity going on. So it's a dynamic site. Sherwood is well suited for this. The feasibility study that's been done shows that this is a wonderful location, even though there's other competition around the area. And the demand is here for due to all the new houses, as well as kind of a gap in this type of facility for this area. And at that, I guess we'll go to questions.
All right, does anybody have any questions of the applicant? I showed there was one more, I didn't know if you had another person that was going to provide testimony tonight, or just in case we have questions in there.
Yep, there's people here to answer questions.
All right. Well, Mr. Schmidt answered my question, which was about the vibration and noise and air quality concerns, because I want to know what type of go-karts they were, and he got it in my, I mean, I tend to ask questions. I write a lot of notes, and you answered the big one that I had on my thing. So the other question I had is just a semantics thing about the subdivision. Why are you dividing it into 5? What benefit do you get by that, and what is the? And then I'm going to ask staff what does that mean to the city? Consequences, or good or bad for us to have 5 parcels instead of 1. Tag.
So I think that's just to create some flexibility for how this site develops. When you have multiple units of land, you can have somebody come in and purchase that land. It doesn't have to be necessarily owned by the same entity for perpetuity. So depending on the tenants of the various buildings, there's just additional flexibility. If they want to come in and actually own the land that contains the building, they would potentially have the opportunity to do so.
Also presume for funding. My question is because the one lot that you're creating doesn't have direct access on the road, and so it's a chicken or egg in the staff report, which is that by approving the subdivision, we approve an access road versus the access road being approved because there is a subdivision. It was just one of those things that I read and went, okay, well, curious why, and then what consequences it would be in the community to have created a precedent of the subdivision where we're creating our own access, a private access road rather than direct access onto the street.
I don't think that this is an uncommon pattern for this type of development, and city staff can probably speak to that question better than I can. In regards to the access easement, I think the city's definition of lot includes a lot that has access to a public right-of-way via an easement. And the configuration that we've kind of arrived at here is consistent with past approvals that the city has issued, I think to in fact other phases within this same PUD. So I'm not aware of any negative issues that have come out of that to this point.
So each lot meets its own parking standards, or do you have a shared parking agreement across?
There would potentially be a shared parking agreement if, because we've also laid out the parking, assuming that all of these buildings are going to generally be retail uses. There is some flexibility in that theoretically based on what the permitted uses are in the zone, but we feel like we've designed a parking area that can accommodate the range of parking requirements for those allowed uses. So a tenant could come in and if they don't fit neatly into that retail use that we've shown here, they'd have to go through a review process with the city to make sure that their use is permitted and they have available parking. But we believe we've created a framework here that would make that work. Again, I think the likely development here is as we're showing with retail, but there is flexibility, I think, built into the design.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions of the applicant?
I have a couple. So I was noticing on the delivery route that you guys have around the perimeter, how are deliveries going to make it to the retail spaces A through C? Will they need to be hand walked over?
No. So common practice for loading areas is there generally times of the day when that parking is not occupied, typically in the earlier mornings before the stores have opened, and that is a common time where loading and deliveries would occur, and likely they would use the vacant parking that's available at that time to do their loading closer to those buildings.
Okay, so there would be delivery opportunities within the parking spaces.
Yep.
I have some more questions. What about the trees that are being planted along the east side of the development, so between lots 1 and lot 2? What's going to happen to all those plantings when lot 1 is developed? Are they going to be ripped up?
I think potentially they could be. They not necessarily. It's going to, I think, probably depend on what happens on the adjacent lot. Whatever does happen would have to comply with the city's tree protection standards. So there's generally a certain tree canopy percentage coverage that would need to be met, and regardless of when in there, it would have to comply. And whether those trees were removed and mitigated elsewhere, I think it depends on the specifics of what would happen on that site.
And then last questions, traffic. So the increased traffic that will hit Langer and Tualatin Sherwood and then Century and Tualatin Sherwood, are there any planned improvements for those? Well, I know the one intersection is pretty new. But are there any planned improvements for like the Century to the Tualatin Sherwood? I don't know who that question goes to, so I'm kind of looking back and forth.
So we have a transportation engineer from Kittleson who might be able to speak in more detail to that specific question.
Good evening. My name is Brian Dunn. I'm a transportation engineer with Kittleson and Associates. Our address, well, we just moved this week, so I'm going to give you our old address because I haven't memorized our new one yet. 610 Southwest Alder, Suite 700, Portland, Oregon 97205. To answer your question, Commissioner Rep, as far as planned improvements is the question directed at improvements that this project would make or planned improvements that are public improvements that are perhaps forthcoming?
I think that's kind of why I was looking back and forth, because I'm not really sure who that question would go to. I do think that this additional planned unit development is going to create quite a bit of traffic, and I know that I use Century Drive to get home. And so it is hard. I see people waiting to turn left off of that road onto Tualatin Sherwood for a long time, as well as people waiting to turn into it. So I'm just imagining the increased impact of the additional traffic and that only getting worse.
So we did prepare a transportation impact study, submitted that to the city for review, and in that study we did look at the impacts of the increased traffic associated with this project, not just the outlying retail pads, but also the Family Fun Center use as well, the FEC, which, in the process of preparing the study, the city even had us go out to make sure that we were, coming up with realistic estimates of what this center could generate. So we did go out and look at 3 example sites in the metro area and collected that data. So when all was said and done, we added that traffic in, we did evaluate the intersection impacts, not just at the roundabout, but up at Tualatin Sherwood Road and Langer, and also 2 highway intersections out at Oregon 99W at Tualatin Sherwood Road and then down at Edie Road. And so our findings were that the intersection, the signal that you're referencing, was operating adequately, meaning it met the city's level of service standards as well as Washington County's mobility standard, which they do own Tualatin Sherwood Road. So there were no improvements proposed for mitigation purposes at that intersection. It was still functioning adequately. In terms of other projects that are coming, Washington County for some time has had a project to improve Tualatin Sherwood Road. I think everyone's probably aware of that. That's been stalled somewhat. It's in, from what I understand and talking with ODOT and Washington County, that project is, I think, moving forward again to make those improvements, which would extend not just east of Langer, but also continuing west all the way through the 99W intersection and further west towards Porches Road. Though that project, I think, is estimated to be about $12 million. It's part of the MSTIP project, so it's essentially funded. Estimated timeline for that project to begin work again on the design and right-of-way acquisition, I think, is in the next year, which it would still take some more time after that for construction. That is a pretty big capacity improvement project. There are more through lanes being added. There are signal modifications being done, trying to squeeze even more efficiency out of the lanes that are already out there today. So those are the improvements coming. We did agree to a condition of approval that was first referenced by ODOT and also supported by city staff to make a proportionate share contribution towards the intersection at 99W and Tualatin Sherwood Road. We know that intersection's challenged today, and it will continue to be challenged in the future, and this was our way of making our proportionate share contribution towards that intersection. I think that's it as far as public improvements.
What is your hope as far as the timeline on beginning this or the completion? I know there's like 5 phases, so which one's first? Is it the bigger portion of the fun center?
So there aren't 5 phases.
Okay.
There are the 5 lots that are proposed. I think the city has timeline requirements for their approvals that we'll have to obviously meet. But I think the idea is that the fun center would be the first building to develop, and that subsequently after that, within the required time by the city, the rest of the buildings would be developed. It's hard to anticipate. I don't know that there are tenants for all those buildings yet at this point, but obviously it's in the applicant's interest to make sure things happen as quickly as feasible.
I think the reference to 5 phases was in your Exhibit J, which we don't quite have a copy of here, but there was 5 phases in response to the site improvements, and phase 1 being the west half of the building, phase 2 being the east half of the building.
So there was a question that we posed to staff.
So that's where the 5 phases, I think, was coming from.
And I think the clarification that we got from staff on what the city's required timelines are between when an approval is issued and when construction needs to happen kind of made us realize that there is not any sort of need for a specific phasing plan, that we're confident that everything that can happen would happen within the city's allowable timelines. I think that any sort of conceptual plan that was shared with the city was conceptual only. It wasn't a definite phasing.
I understand the difference. It's a layman's term of a phasing plan. A phasing plan to a layman means which building are you building versus an applicant city phasing, which is an official document that they have to provide with.
Yeah,
and
so
I can let staff's nodding, and I'm just, as you're saying that, I'm getting it, because the terminology for phase is not the same when you're a layman reading this going, hey, phases 1 through 5, this is the order you're going to do it, versus a legal document that you submit as to the phasing.
Correct. It was conceptual in trying to work with staff to make sure that kind of the plans for the project could happen in an allowable timeline.
Which then made the public improvement part being done all at once important, because it's not a phased project. All the buildings are going to be done in one cohesive group, which means all of the public improvements need to be
Correct.
done at one time.
We're not proposing to change, the timing of the public improvements per the recommendations and conditions in that report.
Got it.
It's clearer.
Yeah. I think again, I put out as my citizen volunteer, I think I got that from someplace else, that, I get that the phase, if you had a phased project that was going to come over multiple years, you might have public improvements come in at different times.
The implications would be much greater.
Different. And again, from a layman's standpoint, it was, but can I revert back to Kara's question, which has to do with the intersection of Century and 12th and Sherwood Road? I don't believe, and it may not be you to answer, it may be Bob Galati that comes up and answers it, but are you making improvements at Century and 12th and Sherwood Road? That is an uncontrolled intersection right now. That seems that traffic from this project will impact that, and it's already a challenge, because you see people starting at the railroad tracks driving down the center of the turn lane to turn left onto Century Drive, and it again is an uncontrolled intersection. So
yeah, I don't believe that the findings in the traffic study warranted any sort of improvements to that particular intersection.
I don't want to. I know you guys know how to do your jobs. You're professionals. I definitely do not know how to do your job. Do you guys take into account, like, has potential to sound really ridiculous, things like the Waze app, right? Where that people aren't taking like normal streets, like, you know, maybe before this everybody would just know one way and just go that one way. Whereas these days, you know, if there's traffic somewhere, it's going to reroute you through a neighborhood, through this, through that. Do you guys take that into account when you're doing your traffic study?
We don't necessarily take into account technology like Waze app, but as traffic engineers, we use our engineering judgment and whatever tools that are readily available. Like, I mean, the Waze app can tell you how many options there are, but it doesn't really tell you how many people are perhaps using those routes. We have, you know, if we're doing large sub-area studies or TSPs, you know, we rely on travel demand models. And those models look at multiple routes and the congestion along those routes. And so I'd like to think as traffic engineers, we think of the same thing when we're looking at a site development. You know, what are the routes that people would take, and, you know, fastest route, routes that maybe have the least amount of congestion, routes that have traffic control along the way, and also the functional class of those roadways. So we do, in this instance also, we did a scoping memo with the city up front to just go through some of those assumptions, to make sure that we're on the right path before we move forward with the full study.
So the assumption maybe was made that that route will be used, but it won't be as impactful, perhaps, as the Langer, Tualatin, Sherwood.
Yes, I believe so. I think that we sent more traffic to the north along Langer up to Tualatin, Sherwood, because the traffic is distributing in multiple directions. Tualatin, Sherwood Road to the east towards Tigard or Lake Oswego, Clackamas County that's one route that people could take, but there are multiple directions that the overall traffic can go.
Thank you for humoring me a little bit with my question there.
Well, but we have the right to ask the question, because I'm looking at the traffic study going, you're telling me that there's only, and I just happened to flip to the Century Drive, Tualatin, Sherwood Road page on this traffic analysis, which says Century Drive northbound, it's only going to be like 3 turns, 4 turns, 5 turns right, but during that period of time, and 0 turning southbound onto Century Drive, but that doesn't pass my reasonability test because I drive that road every day and I see people turning left from Tualatin Sherwood Road left south onto Century Drive, so I don't know how you have a 0 on your traffic report. And I could be looking at the wrong page. I think it, and you know, like I said, staff might have better answers. I mean, we're not traffic engineers, but we drive that road every day, and it doesn't make any sense that you're not going to improve Century Drive.
So if I may, I just want to remind you guys absolutely can ask questions that is appropriate, but it's still a public hearing, and I don't believe you've
Ask for proponents and opponents.
Right, and
correct.
so this might be something that they can respond to a little bit more detailed in deliberations.
So I don't have to grill them right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Just a suggestion.
Thank you very much. I'm like a dog with a bone. I got a little concerned about this traffic thing. I mean, it's a big deal in the city of Sherwood on 12th and Sherwood Road. So thank you for the reminder to take a break, and we'll get the proponents and opponents, and they can come back on rebuttal.
Yeah, and then just as a reminder, we do have Bob, but also Garth from DKS, who's our on-call traffic consultant here, if there's any questions from the city traffic review perspective that you want different from theirs.
Okay.
I do have a question to the maintenance and upkeep, non-traffic related.
Perfect.
So if this is going to at some point in time become potentially deeded 5 different properties, right? I understood that correctly earlier. How do the common areas come to responsibility to stay clean, organized, upkept, etc.?
So, as part of the subdivision process, I believe at the time of the plat, the applicant's responsible for providing any sort of covenants or agreements that would address some of those questions. I think essentially that's the same. You'd face that same issue whether it's in ownership by one party or a number of parties. Anybody who's willing to invest a significant amount of money to make this happen or to own property within the project, their interest is going to be to make sure that it stays a well-maintained, well-manicured facility. It's an economic self-interest question. Theoretically, there will be agreements to address any sort of common areas, and those will be provided to the city at the time of the plat.
Thank you.
B3, covenants, conditions, and restrictions provided. Nice. Perfect. All right, any other questions of the applicant before I call my other blue cards? All right. We will.
Okay, thank you.
You have 20 minutes for a rebuttal. I have one more applicant card. John Christensen, were you coming to speak this evening or wait to be called upon?
I was just here for extras.
Okay. I have one person who signed up as a proponent, Matt Grady.
Good evening. My name is Matt Grady with Graymore Development. Address is 19767 Southwest 72nd Avenue, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon, zip code 97062. I'm now apparently a vice president of project development for Graymore. I've been there about 20 years, and we've developed a lot of centers, including the one just to the north of here. And you guys have got my letter, and if you've had a chance to read it or see it, I thought I'd just highlight some of the things I've been hearing to help answer some of the questions that have been coming up in the discussions you've had with the applicant. One of them is the coherency of the whole parking area, and how does that get maintained if you've got 5 parcels, right? Is one going to have a different standard from the next person, and you're going to see the stark difference either along the street frontage or interior? Likely there'll be a minimum CC&R, which is going to say we're going to have street sweeping and clearing, and we're going to have landscaping services going on, and everyone's going to share, and they're usually a pro rata share of their square footage. Even if there's different parcels with different ownerships, the goal will be to keep it looking really coherent. For the parking, likely there'll be a shared parking agreement, which happens so that people can actually park on the other lots with certain provisions. It might be timed at peak times where they shouldn't be there on a Saturday night when the fun center is going crazy, but the other stores aren't as busy. So I think that's probably how it will play out. I don't honestly know how the Langer family's got it all figured out yet. I don't think they do. But they have a great example to follow, with this, which is what we've done with them up on the just to the other side of this road. The retail parking was another question that came up, and it happens with us all the time. And the retail buildings, which are on the perimeter, are basically designed to have multiple tenants. So it's going to be very rare that if the whole tenant's going to take over the whole building. And so there'll be tenants that are sized 800 square feet to 1,200 square feet. And so they don't have big loading needs, except when they actually develop their interior. When they have people working on the interior, they'll have some trucks which come by. And then they'll have supply trucks which will come by usually, and they park right in the same spots that cars park in, but they usually come in the morning time, and if they need a double wide, they'd take 2 stalls and slide through if there was a larger truck with a lift with a pallet, which would come down. And so frequently that's how that's handled. So you don't have a big truck just marching right through and just blocking customers there. This last thing they want to do is be inconveniencing things unless they were held up in a snowstorm somewhere. And if that's the case, there probably wouldn't be anybody shopping either, at least that day. Vegetation in the parking lots. This particular application actually has a greater tree canopy coverage, which will happen when the trees mature than what's actually required, which is great. It's got more landscaping area that's required. In our center over on the other side, we were subject to the new regulations which came in to provide this similar canopy and similar ground plantings. And what you witnessed was actually a robust planting, which doesn't always happen in parking lots. And quite frankly, the landscaping team, which takes care of it through property management, just hadn't chipped the stuff down enough so that when you're sitting in your car looking around the next corner, you can actually see that. We like it so that it's 3 feet essentially for security reasons, so policemen from out of perimeters and coming into the parking lot has a clear path of vision, and there's nobody hiding down in bushes trying to sabotage somebody. So it's an internal thing which happens with the private property management, but I can tell you from experience that oftentimes we've had plans that are so sparse that we don't have enough plants at all, and we hate bark dust, so we try to put more plants in. And so to have successful plant growth has actually been a good thing, but not to the extent that you can't see out and around the corners. And so it's good for us to hear that, where you've been going to other places. How am I doing for time? I'm out. I've read the recommendation, the conditions of approval, and support this project, and think that you guys should join in, hopefully, with the conditions of approval. So that's what I've got for you.
All right.
Totally off script, but
There you go. That's fine. We're pretty flexible. We want to hear what people have to say. It's an opportunity for us to learn also. So does anybody have any questions? Mr. Matt Grady? All right. Thank you for taking the time to testify.
yeah.
All right, so we can either take, I don't know if anybody needs a break, or we can just call the applicant back for rebuttal. Looks like we're good. So if the applicant would like to return for any rebuttal. I think you were tagged with that one, yes.
Again, this is Brian Dunn with Kettleson, just responding to the question about the trip assignment particularly through the intersection of Century at Tualatin and Sherwood Road. I think the Commissioner Simpson, the 4 or 5 trips that you noted was from a figure 7 in our traffic study, and the title of that figure is rerouted or pass-by trips. And there are some minor trips that we would pull off a street, existing traffic that we'd pull off a street related to the retail use and put them back onto the system. And that is one minor pattern. But in the figure prior to that, figure 6 of the traffic study, this is the trip assignment for what we call primary trips. These are trips that are generated by the site, destined to and from the site. And if you look at the same intersection there, you'll notice that the left turn off of Tualatin Sherwood onto Century and the right turn from Century onto Tualatin, those numbers range in magnitude from 18 to 27 trips.
What page are you on your report?
Figure 6 in the traffic study, it's after page 17.
Is that per day?
These are AM and PM peak hour trips. Those are the windows of time that we do our operations analysis on an intersection level.
So the 18 to 27 includes AM and PM?
Correct.
Okay.
And then if you go further into the report on figure 8 of the traffic study, you'll see the operations results for that intersection, which show in both the AM and PM peak hours with our traffic assignment laid over, that intersection operates at a level of service C, and a VC, or a volume to capacity ratio, of 0.21 and 0.22. I think that's what it's saying here. It's such small text. 0.23 and 0.22. And so that's a measurement of demand divided by capacity. The county standard is 0.99. So there's theoretically, and based on the capacity calculations, there's a lot of capacity remaining there.
Even without a controlled intersection.
Without a signal. Correct.
This is additional trips, right?
Those are the additional trips that we were talking about, correct.
It's like way in the back part of it's like the last few pages, right?
Of the traffic study?
Yeah.
The summary of the operations? Mm-hmm. Well, you can find them graphically in that figure 8. Which is on page after 20, so page 21 of the traffic study.
Oh. I'm almost going to make you come up here. I don't find it. Got it.
There's also a table just before that on page 20.
Well, I went to all the colored pages.
So you can go either way, graphically or through the table that shows the results.
Oh, I did. I go into the colored pages in the back. Got it. doesn't mean anything because I'm not paid professional to understand, except I do know level service C, and that VC being 2.3 is, well, much better than 0.99, which is what we're having on Edie Road right now, I'm sure.
And again, I would just reiterate that the transportation study was scoped with city staff, and they have reviewed several iterations and additional supplementals, and they may be able to speak to some of these questions additionally, but we feel the traffic study indicates that we're meeting all of the standards that we need to meet at the intersections that were studied, and in fact are contributing potentially a significant amount of money for our proportional share of the intersection up on the highway.
So the fee in lieu of construction is what's happening because of a couple reasons. One, it makes no sense to improve Century at 12th and Sherwood Road when the county's going to come through and blast it all out to make 5 lanes in the next 2 to 3 years. Hopefully.
Right, yeah.
We're hopeful that they'll do that. Having lived in this community long enough to know that every project that comes through impacts 12th and Sherwood Road, and everyone wants the next guy to fix the entire problem is unrealistic. But for what impact you do, I guess I feel like it's our responsibility to make sure that we know that the impacts are being mitigated proportionately.
I don't have my chart with me. So as a point of comparison, how many left turns do you have coming off of 12th to Sherwood Road, left turn onto Langer Farms Parkway?
We assigned all of it back at the previous intersection, which is Century. So we looked at the worst case of pulling that traffic off onto Century and what that impact would be to that intersection.
So then you're saying only 18 to 27 trips will be coming from Tualatin essentially per day?
Those trips were directional, so both directions combined, 27 plus 25, so over 50 trips in the peak hour.
Just in the peak hour, not over
Per
the
hour.
entire
Sure.
day.
Oh, that's per hour.
Per hour.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just want to ask a clarification, just because, are we talking, Century is the unsignalized intersection, Langer Farms Parkway is the signalized intersection, and you're saying you assigned all the trips to the unsignalized intersection at Century?
Yes, for the westbound left turn off of 12th and Sherwood onto Century, and the northbound right turn from Century onto 12th and Sherwood.
All right. Thank you. And as the traffic guy leaves, I want to say thank you to the applicant because, Frank was still up here, so I could tell him that my personal opinion on the elevations on the building is spectacular. I think you raised the bar in meeting the criteria and the code. It's well done, and to hear that the neighborhood meeting had an impact on the ability for the community to interact at a point that made a difference, so that the neighbors across the street aren't looking at your 20-foot plank wall, but they're looking at something that looks beautiful, fits in the community, means that what we did and that the notices that we sent out to all the people made a difference. And someone making a comment that affected change in our community for the better is very reassuring. There's a lot of times you don't feel like the citizens aren't clamoring to come in to tell you you've done a great job, but in my personal opinion, it looks great. So anyway, do we have any other questions of applicant or staff?
I think I have another question that is raised by curiosity. Turn that on. Sorry about that. So the C building, that looks like it potentially could be a drive-through building, right? How do you guys figure traffic coming from out of that? Like, if it's a tenant that's going to bring in a lot of traffic versus something that's just a bank that doesn't get a lot. So how do you guys figure that into the study?
The traffic count?
Yeah.
So another point of clarification, is this a follow-up question to the applicant, or have you
Yes.
closed the hearing and you're asking
We haven't
staff?
closed the hearing
We
yet.
haven't closed the hearing. Yeah.
See the site plan. I think I see it up there. So is this question pertaining to the drive-through? Is it a kiosk?
The drive-through retail C building.
Retail C.
How many trips did you
see behind there. Okay.
you attribute the trips as a bank or as a drive-through restaurant?
Right.
Or
If this is a very modern configuration where they wrap the driveway behind the building. The important thing here is that you're creating a queue length that's very long, and you also and so where the window is relative to where they order, you want to be able to develop enough throat length so you can store multiple cars. The other thing that this pattern does is where these vehicles begin queuing up in the parking lot is nowhere near an external driveway, and I think those two things right there speak to, this is not going to affect the driveway operation on Langer. As far as how it's dealt with on site, there is a pretty long storage space here for this. It also appears now it's just a single lane entrance, so these are it's a very modern layout, whether it's a bank or in this case maybe a coffee drive-through. I can tell you from in our publications that we use from ITE trip generation manuals, these are our Bibles for trip generation. Every single version in the last 10 years of banks, especially drive-through banks, those trips are going down, down, down. With the advent of online banking, Google Wallet, Apple Pay, Bitcoin, I don't know what that's going to do to a bank. So we'll turn that into a coffee shop pretty fast. I'm just guessing, though, where the patterns are going. So I don't think that there should be a concern about the queuing on that drive-through just by its orientation, if that's what you're getting at.
Well, I was just curious if it was going to be some like popular fast food place. It could potentially be like a Chick-fil-A, and those places, Chick-fil-A could have tons of people coming in, and then that, to me, feels like it would change the traffic around the area because it's so popular.
Well,
so I'm just curious it was just a curiosity how you do the numbers
for example, what we applied as far as the land use for trip generation, unrelated to the FEC building, we used retail shopping center. It's an ITE code 820, and we look at the combined square footage of all those buildings out there on the out parcels, because we know that while there's some that are very successful high-intensity trip generators, there are the polar opposites of the AT&T wirelesses and the specialty stores that don't generate that type of auto traffic. And so that's how they balance each other out.
So you did not use the ITE manual code for drive-through on Building C?
No.
Okay. It looks similar in design to the one in the development to the north.
Yeah.
Is that accurate? Okay.
I'm assuming, though, you did use drive-through on the kiosk.
The coffee kiosk.
Coffee kiosk. That's
Go back to the traffic study and look at that one. But I'm assuming we added that one.
As a drive-through.
It could have been its own use in the traffic study on Lot 5. I can pull that up if you're interested.
You think we can confirm that. You can confirm that they did use a drive-through. Look at that. Staff's got your back. So
Bob comes through.
Obviously, traffic's a big issue. So, and I did, when I looked at the coffee kiosk, I went, thank you for making it in a place that the queuing lines are not going to be blocking the street, because that was a really big deal. And I saw that there's a lot of common sense in the way that one's laid out.
Looks like that one's laid out with a two drive approach.
Yeah.
So when drivers approach and they see they have an advantage on one side versus the other, they'll
But they also
accommodate.
have queuing distance in the parking lot, not on the street.
Same thing.
Yeah,
Internally,
because there's one in Tualatin that is always parking in the street. That is, it just is. I appreciate that you took the time to get the queuing that will be in the parking lot, not on the street. So, all right, any more questions of the applicant?
They're good questions.
Thank you.
And we're not trained traffic engineers, so.
Well, that's why we bring traffic engineers.
All right. Do we have any other questions of staff before we close the public hearing? Any concerns that you want to have Bob or DKS answer about traffic trips or any other concerns about Century Drive? All right, then we will close the public hearing. And we can have final comments by staff, if any, or questions of staff, if any. And I think I heard that he was in agreement with the conditions in his opening statement. So, we are at discussion if we have a motion to discuss. A motion for the do we have a motion to go into deliberations?
I was confused by what you were asking.
That's okay, I didn't get all the words out in the right order anyway.
So you're not having a discussion, there's no need for discussion.
Well, I guess I would put the motion on the floor and then we have deliberation off the motion. Or we can discuss it and then have a motion. You get to choose. So as with the applicant, I would like to commend staff for an excellent staff report. I think the other thing that having read a lot of staff reports, it is extra appreciated from the person who dots I's and cross T's to see all the conditions of approvals tied back and forth so that we could follow them through. So I very much appreciate that and the thorough staff report. So it feels like we've got all the information in front of us and it's really clear and objective standards that we're going by. So thank you.
I knew when I saw that you would like that in particular. Just a point of clarification. If you were debating and discussing changing conditions, maybe having that deliberation, because what I've seen in the past is where you discuss modifications and then the motion is, as modified. So
As
I guess
modified.
if you're leaning in that way, you might want to have that conversation before a motion is made. If you're thinking that there aren't, it doesn't sound like there's been a lot of discussion of changing of motions or anything like that. But if that's not something that you're thinking about, then making a motion and then discussing it would be appropriate.
All right. Does anybody have any conditions that they're concerned about based on any of the testimony received or the staff report? All right.
So I'm trying to figure out which one I'm doing. I'm new at this too.
We are the decision maker, so we would either recommend approval or denial of the application.
And you're not recommending, you are making.
Oh, we're moving
Yeah.
to recommend. I'm sorry, we're moving to approve or deny. Get recommend out. We are going to either approve it or deny it, and then their appeal is to council.
I will move to approve the application with the conditions.
He's got a little script.
Oh, is there a
to read.
script? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Then you can do it.
But he's got
Well,
like 15
and it also
things
wants me to
choose from.
list the conditions. Do I have to do that?
No.
Yeah, that's what I was like, oh my gosh, that's like a lot.
It's going to be 9 o'clock.
As listed in the staff report.
There you go.
Well, it says that here as well, but then it says listed. I'm like, oh gosh, we need to fix that so it doesn't shock me.
All right, yeah. If you could start reading those, we'll catch you after coffee then.
All right, so that makes it much easier, and I'm not as hesitant here.
Okay.
All right, I recommend, I move that the Sherwood Planning Commission forward, nope, wrong one. Sorry.
I screwed it all up by getting that word recommend
Yes.
in there.
Yes,
My
you did.
apologies.
I move the Sherwood Planning Commission approve the application for SP 17-01 SUB 17-03 Parkway Village South based on the applicant testimony, public testimony received, and the analysis, findings, and conditions in the staff report with the modifications listed in the staff report.
Well, it's a revised staff report.
Revised staff report.
There you go.
Okay, yes.
there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve SP 1701, SUB 1703, Parkway Village South Site Plan and Subdivision. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for this evening. And Josh didn't have to rescue me, so thank you. I know. Made it through. All right. The only other agenda item are planning commissioner announcements. Does anybody have any announcements?
I have one.
Yes, please.
So I am part of the Sherwood Foundation for the Arts Board, and our upcoming play in January is 5 weeks away. So we are doing The Odd Couple. This is going to be our second winter show that we've done in the Art Center. And what's going to be a little bit different this year is we're actually doing 2 versions of The Odd Couple. So one version will be a male cast, and the other will be a female cast. It was rewritten by the same playwright to do 2 different versions, and so we'll be alternating each show to do that. So it's going to be January 19th, 20th, and 26th and 27th. There will be a discount if you go see both shows. We hope that you all go and support the arts here in Sherwood.
Wow, that is fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting us know that. All right.
And Sean's wife is in the female cast.
There. And now you know what to say at the council meeting to do that. What?
I was just going to say that it's a commissioner's birthday, and so maybe
Commissioner
just
Dan's birthday, yes.
happy birthday on TV for everybody.
Yeah, on the record, and I will not sing for you as my gift to you and the rest of the hearing audience.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think that will end our first meeting. With
Move to adjourn.
All right. Second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
And
Aye.
out we go. Thank you.